So let's talk a little bit about what these routines are and where they came from. It's all based on a book by Mike Rother called Toyota Kata. And Mike really operationalized managing people for improvement, adaptiveness, and superior results. He spent some time studying Toyota, not the things you can see. He didn't study the typical lean tools or techniques, you know, the things you can see when you go on a benchmarking trip, things like 5S and Andon or Hijunka, Kanban, you know, flow racks, point of use inventory. That's the typical thing others study when they go to Toyota, but what Mike really studied was more of the things you can't see, the behaviors of managers and subordinates in their daily routines, you know, utilizing tools and techniques when needed to eliminate obstacles, but really focusing in on those behaviors of managers and their subordinates. And what he uncovered was some really unique management routines, namely coaching and learning routines using an interconnected set of behaviors practiced frequently to create a predetermined mindset leading to a deliberate and sustainable culture within an organization. And in this particular case, Mike was really focusing in on the continuous improvement efforts, right? Those behaviors that organizations do to create whole new levels of performance. And one of the things that we've learned along the way is those behaviors are really closely connected with a couple of other key activities that go on within quote-unquote lean organizations. And just to touch on those real quickly, the first one is daily management, right? The process for how we manage our natural work groups. We also see policy deployment, you know, the process for how we deploy annual goals and objectives to the workforce. Both of those elements are strongly connected to this continuous improvement, the process to engage our workforce in continuous improvement. And Mike's book really focused on this continuous improvement element, but it is all based on behaviors. So let's talk a little bit about what those behaviors are and what kind of skills we're talking about when we talk about continuous improvement. So this is where the Kata comes in, the Toyota Kata, specifically in this continuous improvement bubble. And what it has led to, what's Mike's studies and as the community at large learns more about Toyota Kata, it's really, I believe, leading to an evolution in lean and continuous improvement. The evolution is a shift from tools and technique implementation to more of an application of foundational skills. And I want to use Michelangelo as a painter. He was also a sculptor and a scientist, a few other things. But as a painter, I want to use him as kind of an analogy of what we're talking about when I talk about foundational skills. So Michelangelo, no one really taught him how to paint the Sistine Chapel, right? What he was taught were really the foundational skills of painting under the guidance of a master. You know, some of those foundational skills, when he began as an apprentice, it starts out pretty basic. They have to learn how to mix paint, create the color that would be used, the palette, right? How to build a brush. Couldn't just run down to the art supply store and pick up a brush. You have to learn how to build a brush, and there are many types for many different styles of painting. Had to learn how to prepare an easel, right? Those, again, you can't just run down and buy one. You have to actually create it. And then he began to practice actual painting under the guidance of a master. Right? Over decades, he practiced these foundational skills, like how to do shading or how to add perspective to a drawing or ultimately a painting. And those skills only came, you know, with time. And under that master, he actually was able to develop the skill that allowed him to create his masterpieces, right? The Sistine Chapel being an example of that. The same case applies in soccer. So let's talk just for a second about soccer, right? A coach can't teach a player how to play a game of soccer, right? A coach teaches the foundational skills, right, required, the headbutting, the kicking, the goaling. Those foundational skills are what a coach focuses on. So as the player acquires the skill to make the right move in the game to lead the team to victory, that's a coach teaching the sport, right? And this is the same way that we can think about foundational skills required to drive continuous improvement. There are certain basic skills that can be taught, and it's that evolution, right, of lean and continuous improvement, going from tool and technique implementation base versus this evolution to the application of foundational skills. And in the continuous, in the lean community, you know, I think we, and I'm part of that community, having been a consultant since about 1999, we have been teaching tools and techniques, you know, it's kind of like trying to teach Michelangelo how to paint the Sistine Chapel, right? How to do 5S, how to do Hijunka, how to do Kanban. And I think we may have missed some of the foundational skills. And that's what we're evolving towards teaching these days, the foundational skills and how to apply them to improve our processes. So that brings me to these foundational improvement skills. Mike has operationalized the basic skills into 4 basic routines that are under one umbrella called the Improvement Kata. And those 4 routines begin with understanding our direction. Then we grasp our current condition as it relates to that direction, that long-term goal or objective we're striving to achieve. Once we know where we are, then we can establish a target condition, which is one step into our future beyond our threshold of knowledge of describing a pattern of work and outcome objectives on our way to that longer-term challenge, that longer-term direction. And then we begin the fun part, which is the iterative PDCA cycles. So let's delve in a little more deeply on each of these 4 routines. So starting with understand the direction. Right, this is, we need to gain an understanding of the organization's true north. You know, the long-term vision. Kind of, it's vague, it's far away, it's principle-based, may never get there, but it really is there to help set a direction for the organization and to be a decision maker as we proceed working on our processes, our value stream loops and our value streams, driving improvement. We know the direction we're going. Short of that, there is a challenge that is laid out within an organization at many levels, many aspects of an organization, right? We have to understand the challenge. This is an organization's strategic or annual goal or objectives. Many times these are multifaceted, very concrete, metric-based objectives, very time-based. Typically you'll hear, you know, year-end or Q3 2014, we need to be, I should say Q4 now, where you've moved on into Q4, but at the end of Q4 2014, we need to have this goal achieved, this objective achieved, or this breakthrough performance level. And it has to be in line with our true north, right? The hypothesis here is that if we achieve this challenge, we will have moved the organization closer to our vision. This is really a foundational piece around what policy deployment is all about. The process for how we deploy our annual goals and objectives out to the workplace. You can call this Hoshin Connery, you can call it strategic planning, annual planning. It all falls under that same umbrella. But people in our organization really have to understand what that direction is. And that's where we begin the improvement kata. And what people have to learn how to do, and the only way you can learn this is through practicing, is to take an organizational challenge and parse it down to the process level. And this is really the link to the value stream map, as you were, right? How do we link an organizational level goal down into the process steps? And so learners have to understand and practice how to do that, so they get a grasp of where they need to take their process performance. Once we understand the direction and understand where we need to take a process, ultimately, our next step is to grasp our current condition as it relates to that challenge, right? So we grasp the details of our current pattern of work. We study the variation in the existing pattern, and then we study performance results as outcomes from the existing patterns of work. So every pattern of work creates an existing, or let's say a design level performance. This is really a strong link to the daily management piece of the Kata Connection. It's the process for how we manage our natural work groups, and in daily management embedded is visual tracking, outcome metrics tracked on daily management boards, visual factory, it's often called, shop floor management, it's often called, but we call it daily management. And a lot of times grasping our current condition leads us right to our daily management techniques and our daily management boards. Then we have the third routine of the improvement kata is to establish a performance target based on a new level of process metric consistency in alignment with our challenge, right? So we have that longer term challenge out there. It could be 3, 6 months out, a year out, or strategically 3 to 5 years out. We've grasped our current condition as it relates to that challenge. Now we establish our first target condition somewhere between where we are and where we're going. And part of that is not just metrics-based, but it's define the desired pattern of work that will achieve those results. And in practice, typically we find target conditions are very challenging for new practitioners to define. These are not vague, ambiguous statements, but mathematically correct, measurable, time-based, desired patterns of work that you will next identify obstacles preventing you from achieving that target condition. And this is where we really begin the iterative process of the PDCA cycles. Once we have a target condition, once it's established, then we can really identify obstacles preventing us from achieving that target condition. And by identifying obstacles, and it really brings, I think, an aspect to this type of continuous improvement methodology, something that I refer to as purpose-driven. So once we have our list of obstacles, we choose one and only one, and then we experiment our way to overcome and eliminate the obstacle, right? We don't really experiment to achieve our target condition directly. We experiment to overcome and eliminate obstacles in our way to our established target condition. Again, this is what gives, in my opinion, the real purpose-driven continuous improvement. There are some things that you will leave undone. There are some things that you may recognize them as a problem. You may recognize them as what is typically referred to as muda or waste, but it doesn't necessarily mean you will eliminate that muda or that waste or that solve that problem if it's really not in your way to your target condition. And let's just talk a little bit more about this PDCA cycle. By the way, the first letter, the P, is for plan. Now this isn't the typical plan that at least I had been experiencing as I, let's say, finished up a Kaizen event and laid out a 30, 60, 90-day action plan, or I did a process improvement effort in an administrative support functional area where we laid out a desired future state for a current, for a process map, let's call it, a desired or future state process map. And then we made a plan of what we believed everything we'd need to do to get us to that new process, future state process map. In this scenario, in this improvement Kata routine, our plan is really a design experiment. And it's a simple single factor experiment with a hypothesis that we would actually lay out the plan, lay out the hypothesis, answering the questions by making this change in my process. What do I expect to happen and what do I expect to learn? And that's part of the plan process. Then what we do is that's the D part of PDCA. We execute the experiment. And we gather data when we do that. We observe very closely as we execute the do portion of PDCA so that then we can check on our results. And this is where you actually compare what you expected to happen with what actually happened, and you either affirm or refute your hypothesis. And we hope in many of these cases that we actually refute our hypothesis. A refuted hypothesis is actually an opportunity for new learning. An affirmed hypothesis is simply affirming what we already know. By definition, that's not learning something new. What we want to do is get to refuted hypotheses, to actually learn something new, so then we can do the A part of PDCA, which is act on what we've learned. If it is affirmed, we can, our hypothesis is affirmed, we can act and incorporate that change, the results of our experiment into our future. Or if we refute our hypothesis, we can act on that and make our next hypothesis, design our next experiment to move us closer to eliminating the obstacles in our way to our target condition. So how do we learn these skills, right? Just like Michelangelo, we develop skills by practicing under the guidance of a master. In our world, that master is our boss. Our boss coaches us along the way. This is really a chain of command activity. It's not a staff-led activity. It's chain of command where a natural process owner will be performing the improvement Kata activities under the guidance of their manager, and by manager I mean anyone who's supervising someone. That could be from a team leader to a supervisor to a manager to a director to a vice president to a CEO. Anyone in that chain that has a subordinate is there to coach that subordinate in these tools and in these approaches of the improvement Kata activities. So the role of the coach, or i.e. the manager, is to teach the improvement Kata, teaching skills, coaching skills in the areas of understanding the direction, grasp the current condition, establish a target condition, and then stay in the corridor of applying the scientific methodology behind this iterative PDCA cycles. And the coach actually uses a 5-category question card. It's a it in of itself is a kata, or a routine, of how to teach a specific way of acting, to thus teach a specific way of doing. So the role of the coach is really about developing their learner, or the natural process owner, around these improvement kata skills. Yes, they're interested and are held accountable for obtaining improvement, but the coach is really interested in altering the thinking and acting of the learner, resulting in a new mindset. And every coach also needs a coach. We need to learn how to coach. We've been managers of us, and we've been rewarded for very specific behaviors that are counterintuitive to developing our learners. So let me give you, an example. When I first started to become a manager, and I received the first business card with the title manager on the card, I thought, great, I finally get to make all the decisions. I believed that as a manager, that was my role, to make all the decisions, to develop solutions, and then just have my people execute my decisions, execute my solutions. And while we may have, following that methodology, obtained improvement, we didn't really focus, or I didn't really focus on developing my people's ability to develop their solutions. And so when a problem is encountered, I would go into my control and directive mode, make a decision, design a solution, go forth and implement. What I was lacking was, I believe, a really good second coach. A second coach that has a vested interest in developing my management skills and my skill set as a coach, right? So in this model, my manager is my second coach, and they're there with me when I teach my learners the improvement kata. And so my second coach, i.e. my boss, again, very chain of command, is teaching me how to coach, how to, drop my control and directive approach, go to a more Socratic approach, putting the development of my learners in front of the obtaining improvement. So different management model, and that's what we believe this really is. It's a way to manage our people and develop their skills to obtain continuous improvement results. And again, it's all linked to this Kata connection, where we have the continuous improvement activity, the daily management activity, process for how we manage and develop our work groups. There's a very specific pattern or kata behavior around daily management, policy deployment, clearly how we deploy annual goals and objectives out to the workplace is an integral part of this connection of behaviors and this chain of command through the organization. And lastly, the process to engage the workforce in their continuous improvement efforts, right? And this is where Toyota Kata really comes to the forefront, offering up the foundational skills to enable our people to develop results and achieve results they never thought they could achieve in the past. Really tough challenges, developing solutions for problems they've never encountered in the past, innovation, solving their problems, overcoming their obstacles.